Okay, without further ado, let's begin the presentations. Can we have the members from World to Capalla, please?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Capalla World 2. My name is Steve Spanding, and I'm going to be doing a quick introduction of the team. But before I do that, 25 years ago, I was a refugee. 25 years ago in northern Nigeria, my family were refugees. My mom owned the school, my dad owned the church, and everything was burnt down in one day. And we had to relocate to another part of the country. Okay, this is northern Nigeria. Check the history. I'm not making up the story. This is the year 2000. And I can see myself in the story. So all the decisions we had to make today came not just from our individual experience, but after sharing this story, everybody understood that people are going through tough times. As a refugee, you have access to nothing. And so our decisions have to be based on empathy, have to be based on understanding the challenges that people are facing. And so the overall strategy for Capalla World 2 was based on three things. Number one is we want to be sure that people are equitably treated. Not just the refugees that are coming in, but also the people that are citizens. So equitable distribution of resources. And then number two is also ensuring that we approach the solution from a human rights-centered approach, a human rights-focused perspective to addressing the concerns. And then the third strategy is ensuring that we think long-term. Okay, this was the overall strategy for Capalla World 2. And to do further justice to the entire experience that we had in the last 3-4 hours, I have my team members here, the Prime Minister Yufeng, I have the Minister of Labour here, and I have the ATG delegate who also doubled as our Minister of Health. They will walk you through, and then we'll be back to close the session. Thank you. Over to you now, Minister.
Capalla is a prosperous nation with the highest GDP in ATG, facing demographic challenges due to an aging population. So to counteract population decline, the government decides to implement robust policies to attract and integrate refugees. And the existing situation is that Capalla needs to balance the tensions between refugees and its own citizens. There is a natural resistance among the citizens towards refugees. However, in the long-term development perspective, it would be highly beneficial for Capalla if the refugees can be settled reasonably.
Awesome. Now we're going to discuss the budget, how we utilize our budget equitably and also with a human rights-centered approach. We'll pass it on to the Prime Minister now. You guys.
As you can see, our top priority, we stick to human rights. But human rights is not empty talk. We do take great care about migrants' long-term development. So, guided by top priorities, we focus on the migrants, the essential support, and their employment opportunities. But we still need to do some trade-off between the citizens and the migrants. So here's our strategy: is to control of new migrants, control the pace of new migrant influx, as we love everyone who is allocated to get documentation to live and serve in this country. But just like parents cannot give their child a lot of pocket money, we just do our best to make the migrants themselves live decently. And I want to say, we really hope them to grow just like our GDP growth. GDP growth accelerate, and I hope the new Capalla can enjoy and grow and get married, maybe, and get new generation in Capalla, and our citizens can enjoy their life with new Capalla and develop together. So this.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll move over to international relations and how we're connected with other countries. Okay, over to you, ATU delegates, Minister of Labour as well, Minister of Health too.
Yeah. Hi, so I had the privilege of being both the ATG delegate and doubling down as Minister of Health. So I'm going to talk a bit about our international relations. So Capalla has been an active member in the ATG for a long time, boasting one of the highest standards of living in the region. And as such, we have taken a significant role in guiding the organization towards creating a cohesive strategy to address this crisis. So one of our main priorities is digitization and digitalization, defined here, by ensuring that all members utilize the same digital strategy in each country. We can more easily exchange info and compare our outcomes to each other while trying to address this crisis. We've also developed and proposed a joint Altripa agreement. So we'd like to standardize certain policies across the region. So under this agreement, no nation will interfere with an individual's right to seek asylum, period, and will assess all claims fairly, period. We'd also like to see our member nations refrain from detaining asylum seekers, particularly children, on the grounds of illegal entry or stay. There will be an emphasis on inclusive humanitarian aid and development assistance for those in need, particularly during or resettlement times. All members will work to facilitate the safe and legal travel for refugees to the appropriate host country with the ultimate goal of saving as many lives as possible. We would also like for the ATG to be meeting once every 2 years to reflect on this specific agreement and these specific updates and provide progress reports so that we can continue to work together towards managing this crisis over time.
Thank you, ATG Delegate versus Minister of Health. Now I'm going to wrap things up by sharing with you our policy management strategy and how we approach policy, as well as next steps. And if you look on the screen, you see that in deciding on how we approach our policy, we started a campaign that we called the We Can Do It campaign, because we realized that some of our citizens were scared and worried that refugees were taking over their jobs, rescue refugees were in schools. And so we needed to create this campaign so it's clear that the people understand that we are a country that we're welcoming. We want to receive people. And so just assuaging the fears of the citizens, that was the essence of this campaign. Also, we also leverage the insight of key expertise of team members. I mean, you can see this team is very diverse. We have an American, we have 2 people from China and from Africa, diverse team. We leverage the expertise of the team members in solving the challenge. We also definitely leverage this forecasting tool. Before every submission, before advancing to the next slide, we ensure that we utilize all the 3 forecasting tools to be sure that our decisions, the impact it's going to have in the next year is going to be in our favor. And then in terms of the challenges we experienced, we immediately after the first year, I'm sure you all will agree with me that you start realizing that the number of immigrants and refugees that are coming almost doubled. And so we were worried, okay, what are we not doing right? Okay, so that was a major challenge we experienced. And then of course, we also have to balance the concern of Capalla citizens. Now, if you look at the platform, you realize that a section called news. If you check the news, you realize that a number of parents are already complaining after the first year, complaining that I can't imagine having my child go to a school with a refugee. And then we see citizens also complaining that my jobs are not secure anymore. So we saw that as a concern that needed to be addressed in the country. And then, of course, towards the end, we realized that we had gone over budget. And the instruction says we shouldn't go beyond 20% of the budget. And so when we got there, we realized that we needed to make a decision. So this was where we needed to start cooperating with other partners, other countries, to ensure that we do not spend beyond the budget. And in terms of the policy focus, this was what I already started with. These 3 things guided all our decisions: a human rights approach, equitable resource distribution, long-term vision and sustainability. So we're not thinking just about now, we're thinking about 10 years, 15 years. I even challenge my thinking for us to take about 50 years. And then in terms of the focus policies, in year 1, we focused on improving the human rights index because we wanted to accept everybody, okay? But year 2, we have to change the strategy. We focused on giving them employment because we realized that our employment score was low. In year 3, we had to collaborate. This was where we sent our ATG delegates to other countries to see what we can do to support them, giving money, receiving money. And then in the final year, when we saw that our money was already out, we needed to now start scaling down on spending so we can manage our budget. Now, in terms of next steps, I'm going to wrap up, is if we have more time to play this game, 3 things we will do better is to prioritize stakeholder engagement and communication. Communication is key because these are things happening that affect and impact everybody. All stakeholders are involved. So we're going to engage with diverse stakeholders to gather insights and perspectives, not just from the refugees, but also from international organizations, national organizations, churches, non-profits, so that it's the feedback we're getting is holistic and we are as socially inclusive and culturally sensitive as possible. Because these are people that are coming from different and diverse countries and we don't know what they're coming with. So we have to ensure that the language is clear. Another thing is we're going to deepen equity and social justice. This is building on our first principle of ensuring that people understand that we are human rights centered. So we're going to pay attention to vulnerable and marginalized groups. That is not going to come out. We're not going to scrap that out because especially for children, people that are disabled, we pay attention to that. And in all policy formulation and implementation will be from the lens of equity and social justice. So on whatever decision we're making, the government understands that we have to ensure that equity is not lost, social justice is not lost, and we prioritize people that are struggling in these areas. And then the last one is leveraging the strength of collaboration and partnerships. Many countries are going through this challenge. Ottania is going through the same challenge. I mean, is the first point of contact, and of course, do it, ensuring that we leverage all these partnerships and collaborations in solving our challenge. So we're not just focusing on inside, we're also thinking externally. How can we collaborate further? And that is why our Minister of Health mentioned the joint triple agreement that all the other countries will commit to. So we're going to foster collaboration across government agencies and international organizations. We're going to leverage the collective expertise, resources, and networks of people within our country and the people externally. I believe in addressing all these problems, in addressing all of these issues and focusing on the strategy that we have here, we're going to significantly reduce and solve the refugee immigration crisis. One final word. I was once a refugee. So I brought that into this game and I hope we win. Thank you so much.
Next up, Ottania from World One. Please come forward.
Hello everyone. So we were acting as the Ottania's government and so I was acting as the Prime Minister and I had Miss Gabriel with Ministry of Labor, and then Tom was for Ministry of Home Office, and K1 was acting as ATG delegate. And we have been trying our best to explain the migrant situation of Ottania. And so what we had is Ottania is a very technologically advanced and rich country, but it has this history of war crime and autocracy. So the Ottania is trying to develop their image, and also the population is very aging here. So they were trying to grab young people here. But the problem was that Ottania was at the southeast part of the country, of the world, and populations were it was hard to get all the people there through all the countries. So Ottania was trying to finance the whole countries, we financially assist the countries to help them to help with the immigrant issue. So it was a bit difficult to have the negotiation and persuade all the countries. And so also, the country was a federal country with federal society with 16 states, so it was a bit hard. Some part of the country was not very welcoming for the immigrant people, but Ottania was trying making people included in the whole immigrant policy, and they were changing policies over the period of time. And also initially we had this a big budget, and we were fighting with how to deal with all the monies and allocate it properly, but eventually over the period of time we figured out the whole process. And next the budget will be discussed by yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alima. So as Alima, she was saying, our country is a country which needs high-skilled workers, and it's at the top of at the top of our map, and it has a very high budget. So the budget at the beginning, in the first year, it was equal to 2 billion, and for this reason, what we tried to do since the beginning was to increase services offered by our country to make sure that the migrants get integrated into Ottania's community. Considering the high budget, we struggled for the first 2 years to reduce the budget surplus and to spend all the resources. And as you can see from the graph, we provided since the beginning wage subsidies to make sure that companies could hire those migrants. And we also provide very high vocational training. Throughout the years, also thanks to the work of our delegate, we were able to increase the funding that we sent to the other countries, also considering, as I was saying at the beginning, that our country was the richest of the region. In this way, things got better, so more migrants were able to come to our country and join our workforce. And among also the initiatives that we took, I want to mention that we provided housing to the migrants, and as I was saying, a lot of trainings in order to ensure their integration, to ensure that they were learning the language. At first year, we didn't provide grants in order to let them open their local businesses, but we understood that in order to increase their employment, that would be a good solution. So this is something that we did throughout the years, giving them 1,000 of loans to each of them. Something that we also did throughout the years was to decrease the cash assistance that we provide to migrants, because we found out that it could lead to a decrease of employment rate. So providing them just with cash assistance, no conditional, would have led to a decrease in the employment. So this is our budget, and I will pass to Alex to talk about international relations.
Thank you for the international relationship. I want to talk about, we have two challenges. The first challenge, we are too rich. And the second one is we lack of the workforce, skilled workforce. So the problem is, after we solve the problems of our domestic issues, we need to clear the channel for the refugees to come across the three countries. So the relationship focus on how to open the channel for the rural. We support them to manage the logistic, like supporting the bus for the refugees, and for Capalla, we supporting them to give the healthy care, education, housing, because we want the refugees educate and go to the Ottania for the for the skilled workforce, and for the durance, because they this is another countries to afford the refugees, and we persuade them to open the free movement of the refugees. So relationships is like we divide by the two fans. The first fans is Urim, because he is in the front of the line to accept the refugees, and the second fans is going to be the Capalla and Durit. That for different fans, we are using different financial support and policy support to help them making a refugee successfully and easy, and get with some money to reach the Ottania. Thank you. And the Tom will be.
Okay. For our policy management, we took a lot of things into consideration when we were deciding which policies to use, and I credit my teammates a lot because we were able to work very well together and cohesively. And whenever there was a disagreement, we were able to talk it out in a way that was trying to benefit these refugees in the country as a whole, instead of our own agenda. So I appreciated that about my teammates. So our steps were to check the metrics. First, we wanted to see what we were lacking and where we needed help, and to fix those things. The next step was to discuss domestic policy changes. What we would all look at the different options that we had to change, and then we would bring them forward and ask if this is what we all thought would be a good idea for the country and for the refugees. The next is to explore international influence. As some of my colleagues have said, we had at the beginning we a little bit focused mostly on domestic policy, and only later in the third and fourth rounds we're able to truly harness international support, and to be able to get policies passed in other places that we needed help with. Next was to negotiate, like I said, and then finally we would forecast and optimize, and try to find the best policies out of those, and see what they would do for us. If we were to do this again, and the simulation was to continue, the continued support that we would enact is we would continue to persist in our strategy of using budget to support the transportation of immigrants to Ottania through the other countries until a significantly larger number were able to arrive. And then eventually we predict that as that was working, and it was, especially in the fourth round, as that is working, there will be a time for a policy shift where the budget and the policies need to shift inward. We would eventually take the money that we were using to help people get immigrants to our country, and then we would change it to money that would be more to support the immigrants that were already there, and support the larger population within the country. We also found it would be important to look at more policies to try to influence public opinion in favor of the migrants. As we've kind of talked about from the beginning, Ottania was not an underdog. We didn't have really, as a country, our whole goal was to make things a little better. We didn't have a lot of problems, but in that lies difficulty in itself. What do you do when you're a world leader? What do you do when you have extra money? Because we could have sat and just made a few policies and let a few immigrants in, and our citizens probably would have been fine. But what do you do when you need to rise to an occasion and to let people into your country to help them? So if this was in the real world, this situation, and we do see situations like this in the real world all the time, I would say that despite political pressure from constituencies that may not understand the needs of refugees, it's important to remember that these migrants are human beings deserving of safety and happiness. There was a lot of talk of what we should do, how we should get people on our side in the country. And we needed to remember that they were more than just numbers on a screen. If this was in real life, these are people with lives, and any efforts that we could take to help them would be worth it for the human rights and dignity. And yeah, that is kind of the approach we took, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Dudley, and I have the absolute pleasure and privilege of representing the Prime Minister of the nation of Capalla in today's simulation. Along with my colleagues here, we're going to tell you a little bit about our policy plan that we executed in collaboration with the other people in the Untitled group, because after all, this is a collaboration. We're not in this alone. And that is always the case. No nation is alone, no nation is in this together. So let's go through this together. So, as I said, my name is Elizabeth Dudley. I'm Prime Minister, along with Capalla, our Minister of Health and Human Services, Dash Bahraini, Minister of Labor, and Cassandra Boncruci, the ATG delegate. We're going to talk to you about the different priorities that we had today. So first of all, I want to give you a quick little start on the situation as we found it. So in 2030, Capalla fell into a catastrophic civil war, which caused a refugee crisis. It's coming across the border throughout the El Treaty Group. And so this is something that we are addressing not only as a domestic force, but as a group of nations together. We're collaborating and we're working to find solutions. But the priority of Capalla as a country was always on the preservation of human dignity in the face of crisis. When we were thinking about the steps we wanted to take, when we were thinking about the actions we wanted to pursue, both domestically and internationally, that was always our priority, to preserve human dignity in the face of crisis. And that is a domestic and regional priority that we pushed in the ATG, as well as in our domestic policy priorities. Again, these are some quotes about the situation that's happening in Capalla that led to this. So we're going to talk about the budget and then international relations, and we'll come back to some of our specific policies. Good evening or afternoon, distinguished guests, countries, and worlds. So our budget, what's most astounding about our budget throughout this whole process is we never ran a deficit or went into debt the entire time. What's important to keep in mind is that our population exploded with migrants with our vast spending on social policy. So we had pretty much a no holds barred on housing, healthcare, transportation to the other countries, unfettered access to our country, no blockages, no detainees. So we ended in about 2023 when our simulation concluded at 26.2% under the budget, still planning to continue spending more. So we understand and acknowledge that our budget was 1.5 billion. That is by no means small in compared to the other groups. We have a very affluent country. What is important to note is that we also gave generously to the mission of our other countries. What you'll see here, this huge dip at one point, we only had $500 million to spend in total in our country. So being generous in spending not only to help migrants and refugees in our country, but in others as well that were hurting. And so it's always important to keep in mind that even with our explosion of population, we were not less than accepting to give a significant portion of our funding to our international brethren, despite ongoing things. Next.
So as we've already touched on, our domestic policy goals were to maximize human rights. Aside from our domestic goals, we also had regional goals. So in 2032 and 2033, respectively, we gave 500 million and 1 billion as recognition that they were the first step that refugees went through. So they had a harder journey in that. So in acknowledgement to that, we gave them money. So we also never took any contribution from the ATG. And we did that because we assessed that and Darude, that and Darude had more needs, and we allocated our ATG contribution to them contingent on them spending that on positive policy for migrants, maximizing their human rights, and also our contribution to was contingent on that as well. So we didn't just look at what was best for Capalla, we looked at what was best for the region and how that affected the refugees throughout.
Hello everyone. So we always put humanity, destiny, and respect in the center of our policy making. So as part of our policy, we always keep our border open and communicate with the neighboring countries because we don't want to refuse anyone because we cannot accept it in certain reason policy restrictions. So we keep our borders open to all neighboring countries and refugee or asylum seekers. And as part, we utilize our budget without concern, without restrictions in the beginning, because compared to original inflow of refugees, the amount of migration is still relatively small compared to like 2 or 3 or 5 years later. So we try to keep our flow taking inflow as much as we could, but in the meantime, we want to keep our quality of living in our country as good as our local residents. We have our full access to education system, full access to our health system, as well as all type of training systems will be open to migrations. Because we want them to be part of our local culture and be able to adapt our environment as soon as possible. Also, to be part of dignity and the care of our refugees community, we always want to learn to understand that we have open society for them, and we keep our housing system to basically provide a very high allowance to our incoming migrants. because we want them to feel like this is their home as well. And also, we integrate and accelerate the individual talents and skills of refugee by providing ample opportunities. We provide training opportunities, we provide loans, we provide all types of startup opportunities for migrants. We want them to be successful in our country as well. So as part of policy, anything first?
I'll briefly speak to the policy of the Prime Minister. As Prime Minister, it was my role to confirm all policies that were taken throughout the country, but it was also my directive to impose our messaging campaigns. And throughout the time that we spent today, our campaigns were focused on inclusion and acceptance and awareness of the goals of our refugee policy. So telling our people in Capalla, we've got this. These people are allowed to come here. They are welcome here. And then upping that to a volunteer policy of telling people, be an active part of your community. Refugees, asylum seekers are becoming an active part of your community. You should be an active part of theirs as well.
As the Minister of Labor, it was kind of a tough responsibility to balance the wants of our Native citizens and our refugees. So in our labor, you'll see that even though we had to make that balance, and we did have that hiring test, which does prescribe some sort of restriction on our refugees, we had no wait for work permits at any point. We provided an increasing amount of startup loans for our refugees. At the point of where our wage subsidies ended, for most of the time in our program, we had a 20% wage subsidy for each refugee, and we ended with extensive mentorship of our refugees to be integrated in our community, which also included helping with the naturalization of each citizen.
So as Minister of Health and Human Services, we always put our respect and dignity in our center of policy making. So for part of our policy, we provide very high housing allowance throughout years because we want them to have quality living in our country, even as a refugee or migrants, because it really matters to the dignity of our refugee or asylum seekers. And also, we have no limit for family unifications because family is part of our migration. We want them to be united no matter where they are. And as part of cash assistance, we provide very low cash allowance because we believe that cash is no good for our migration unification, but we do provide all type of training, education, and healthcare assistance to our migrations. And language training, as part of the adapting local culture, language training is a priority, and we treat it as a very important part of policies. And we, of course, throughout the year, we will increase our incentive to language program and help migrants to get access to our language training and be able to adapt culture and integrate as part of our social society. And education. Education means everything. Without education, our migrants wouldn't be able to adapt culture as quickly as they could. So we try to provide all types of trainings, educations to our migrants and their families. And also to be part of local adoption, we provide welcome classes to the family and their children. Also, for the political asylum seekers, we also provide treatment as part of our healthcare system.
So for the Home Office, we maintained open borders with and DeRitt. We also kept our asylum application processing very well staffed. You can see on vetting, we were strict. However, we had the highest influx of refugees in our region, despite being a small country. We had aggressive policies to make sure that they were always documented. We did not detain. We had freedom of movement. We felt because we were strict on vetting, we could be very liberal with other things. We provided busing and we provided permanent residency after 3 years and naturalization after 6.
So were this world to continue, what would we do? And the answer is increased collaboration and efforts made internationally. We want to create international structures that are based on collaboration and these principles of human dignity that we've discussed so far today. We also want to integrate further calibration of information as we receive it, forecasting tools, the information as it becomes available each year. We want to integrate that further into our systems, but into a regional system as well. Ultimately, like we've talked about this entire presentation, our focus has been on the prioritization of human dignity. Crises happen, but it's how we respond as a nation and as a region that really speak to us and speak to what the future may hold. Thank you all.
All right, thank you all very much for the presentation. And now I want you to know what's in process. The judges have been judging these presentations. Sophie is going to take that information upstairs, load it in so that all of the factors are there, and then she's going to call me with the top scorer. Okay, while that's going on over the next 5 minutes, I'd like to have the judges with these mics say a few words about your experience today.
Hi. So while they're getting started, I'm sure the last thing you want to do is listen to us, John. I just, especially me. So my initial conclusion is probably everybody in this room who is participating in this event is smarter than me. You should take that with a grain of salt. I really and truly mean that. But no, this was a very impressive group of individuals. You are all. This was not like an easy decision for any of us. I think we spent a lot of time going back and forth. It was very close because everybody except you may have written a great memo, and when we talked to you, we made you nervous or something like that. But this was extremely impressive. Everybody was really on point. And I think, I'm probably just focused on this because I've been telling these guys all day that I have to read this presentation on budget, and I have to explain to a bunch of other senior leaders how to do budget, and that's what I was asked to do a week ago. But within a week, come up with how to explain one of the most boring things in the world to a group of people who don't want to be there. So it was a focus of mine, but I thought that everybody approached it a lot differently. I thought that was like a very, I think with the simulation, one of the challenges of the shortfalls of any simulation, you can't predict a wild emergency within the emergency. This is assuming that everything goes 100% smoothly. Hey, this is our budget, no emergencies have happened, we just have a migrant crisis and everything goes on. But on a daily basis, right, as you get out into the workforce and you start to experience, there's always a day-to-day, there's an emergency, sometimes there's an emergency that happens within the emergency. And one of the things I hope you take away, and I know, like I said, we were working within a simulation, is always leave yourself some room for error, right? I think, our instinct is always, as humans, we're always inclined to help and want to give all that we have to help. But at some point, there will come a point in time where you are going to have something else happen that is outside of this that you need to manage. And it's going to be affecting your tax-paying citizens who will be there's a lot of uprising, I think, around New York as it's messaging is really tough on this, right? So every time we make a move, whether it was right, wrong, indifferent, and no, there's never really any intent to harm people here. That's not what we're doing. But it's always judged. It's always like, well, what about me? I pay taxes. I do this, right? So there's always going to be some of that. And I think the real world is always tough. But what I really liked around the groups were everybody considered that this costs money. It's because it does. I can't say that enough. No matter what you do, even when you get to my level, how much does it cost? Can we afford it? How are you paying for it? And I start every presentation with that exact it's only 100 grand. We can do this, or it's only, or it is cost neutral. It's self-funded. Don't worry about it. But I still need the policy decision, right? So that's the first question I know my boss would ask, and I'm sure as you move up in the world, it'll be the first question your boss. There's I saw a lot of different groups with message being driven by your policy, and your budget being driven by your policy, and your policy in some cases driving your budget. And that is something that all three of those things have to match. Most importantly, and I am totally biased because I'm an operations person. The operation should dictate all of those things, right? Operation should dictate what you need to happen on the ground, should dictate your policy. Your policy should dictate your operations, and your operational policy should be dictated by what's happening on the ground. Your budget, what do you need to get the job done? You know, logistics isn't a part of this simulation. So yes, you have all these people and you have all these things. That's great, but what are you missing? How do you get things from point A to point B, right? So there's a couple of those things, and I said the last thing I thought was great was I never heard anybody be like, well, this is our message, let's make our message work. It was, this is what we're doing, let's make our message be the most informative it can be, and that was a great takeaway. And also, quick shout out, I know I caught you, Ottania from group 2. That was a phenomenal policy. That was the best thing I wanted to say. All right, Bill.
Can I use that because of the tremor? Parkinson's tremor, so it affects my use of it. Hey, you're all winners. You are. You all winners. The first thing that impressed me the most was the diversity and how you all manage diversity with these groups. You should be proud of that. This experience you need to put on your resume and say that you were involved in a regional national competition with a diverse group of students from across the country and took a problem with data and came up with solutions and described the problem that you looked at. And believe me, I've been teaching for over 30 years. I've worked with students on competitions like this, and it is a game changer in your career to say that you are here. All right? I want you to do that. I want you to make a commitment to that. And you all took data. You all looked at a problem. You all came up with solutions. That's exactly why you're in an MBA program as professionals in the field. So my hat's off to you. And again, you're all winners. God bless you and have a great career as you move forward.
Thank you, Bill. Molly?
Stay here.
Julianne?
Is this thing on? No, it's not. Okay, how do I do it?
Hello. Oh. I'm Julianne, sorry, spoke loud. I'm gonna sit down because I like to do that. So like everyone already said, I'm so impressed with this group of individuals, with everyone that I observed today. You should all be so proud of yourselves. And I would be happy to live in any world in which you guys are leaders. I'm gonna cry. I'm so emotional. No, you should be really proud of yourselves. You're better than our leaders around the world. Your thought, your care, your compassion and empathy, and your willingness to collaborate was really, really special. Okay. We have one more thing. One more thing. Take care of yourselves.
Hi everyone, Molly Schaefer. I currently work at the Mayor's Office of Asylum Seeker Operations. And I'm the director of it. So every day I sit and think about these issues. And that's what's so special about this for me, because I think, you know, a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, we grapple with every single day. We try to keep the human dignity first and foremost our priority. And we struggle with our budget. We struggle with what New Yorkers think. We struggle with how we're allocating resources to traditional New Yorkers and to our new New Yorkers, and how we're incentivizing people to come, or how are we helping make it easier once they come to really integrate into our society. And so it was really impressive. I think everybody's already said this, but it was incredibly impressive how you approached all of these issues. The other thing I will say is, I'm going to make a plug for this always, we are hiring. So if you are interested at all in working on the local level where things really do get done, and working for the biggest city who is managing the biggest humanitarian influx in the entire United States, I'm happy to entertain that. We also have internships while you're in graduate school, but we have a lot of open jobs right now because we are expanding as we understand it's a long-term issue that the rest of the world and nation is working on as well. So I would just say that, and I'm happy to give my email to anybody to send me information. All right.
Thank you very much, Molly. We have a high scorer, and we'd like that group to come up front so that Wayne can take a picture. And the high scorer is World 2 Capalla.